Computerside Chats is one of the FCTL events that we like to do, and today we are going to be covering chapters 3 and 4 of this book, which is Teaching for Learning. I love it, and I hope you will too. You can also get a copy. We have put, I believe, 2 or maybe 3 copies in the FCTL library collection, and if you go to www.austincc.edu/FCTL, you can click on the link for library and you'll be able to see our collection and check that book out from any campus. So without much further ado, I am going to get started on this. Just so you know, the way the book is organized is for each chapter it presents some research and then some best practices from the research on that teaching method, and then it gives generally about 15 teaching activities that you can use with that method. We don't have time to go through all 15, but I will present some of the research and best practices, and then I will let you guys select from a short list of activities that we're going to wind up to discuss. And there's going to be opportunities for you to chat in and vote on preferences and share your thoughts throughout this session. So we do have you muted just to prevent background noise, but at those times when I say you can chat in, if you prefer to speak rather than chat, you can unmute yourself and talk, but just mute yourself again afterwards. But do make sure everybody's set up to chat to everyone, because that's what makes it fun. We all get to see each other's comments. So that's how we're gonna go today. We're gonna start with chapter 3, which is on reciprocal peer teaching, and I'll share some basics with you guys, and then we'll talk about some best practices. All right. So peer teaching is essentially when you step out of the teaching role for a moment and you give your students the chance to teach each other. The goal here is probably something you've all noticed, which is you know material better and you'll retain it better when you teach it to somebody, as opposed to when you just read it or listen to it. So taking that ownership has real benefits for our students cognitively and socially, because it gives them a chance to act in a professional manner in a class and taking ownership of that course content. So that's really the big deal here. I think it's an important technique to use, and the more we practice it, the better we get at it. So that's really the big deal. Oh, I forgot to mention to all of you guys, I will be sending a PDF version of this PowerPoint to all of you guys. That way, if we don't choose one of the teaching techniques that you were particularly interested in, you'll still get to see the debrief on it. And also, that way you don't have to try to grab down all this information. You can write what is most important to you, knowing that you'll have all of it later. So move on. So the reciprocal peer teaching method, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do in specific techniques, but almost all of them have these 5 things in common that I've just put on your screen. So students are going to have some time for preparation where they learn the material well enough to then share it with their classmates. There's a process of synthesis generally where the students are going to try to reflect on or think about the information and make it clearer to each other. And then you flip-flop the whole thing, and then the students who have been taught will reciprocate. They'll take a turn. And then at the end, there's usually some time for whole class reflection, either through a report out process or through some kind of group discussion. So the students have to prepare, then share what they've learned, then that process encourages synthesis of information, which is a deep method of learning. And then there's that reciprocation and reflection. I do want to mention, because a lot of people hear about this and they go, oh, this is so easy for an instructor because you basically just let students do your job. But it actually requires a lot of faculty preparation. So I will try to guide you through that process as we talk about the specific examples, but it really isn't something you're going to want to use on the fly, and you'll see that in the best practices. Research suggests that students actually feel like they're learning when they're engaged in reciprocal peer teaching, and some of the research says it's about the same as some other methods, but then other research says it's actually better for students. But I always say, even if every study doesn't show that it's better, when students feel like it's a good technique, that means something. Even though we're not great judges of our own learning, if you enjoy the process and if you feel like you're learning, it probably motivates you to stick with it and to try to actually learn. So I still think it's a benefit. So let me know if there's any questions on this so far, and if not, we're going to bounce into the best practices. All right. Okay, so I've got folks in here that'll flag me down if you guys are chatting and I don't notice, so please feel free to chat in, and I will catch up with your questions if I need to. So we're going to jump into these best practices on reciprocal peer teaching. And in this chapter, there's 4. So the first one is about preparation. And we already said that that's a part of every reciprocal peer teaching activity that you're going to do, but the research supports this as important. You would not want to have students go into a peer teaching situation where they teach on the fly or teach kind of in a cold call situation. They need to have time to prepare. So you want to give students a chance either in class to internalize the information or make it a homework assignment that they prepare before they come to class. But when you study to present information rather than just studying to perform on an exam, there's research that suggests that we do better. Students do better on exams when they have that preparation time. And also that we're going to see increased cognitive gains in general and satisfaction. So your course evals might go up if you give students time to prepare before you ask them to teach. And this just makes sense. We all take time to prepare our classes. I would be mortified if someone said, hey, teach on this topic. I'm not giving you any time to prepare. So that's the first finding. You want to give students time to prepare. So finding 2 is that structured tasks matter. You don't want to just say, hey, get in groups and teach each other stuff. As with many tasks, especially for students who are underprepared, giving them real support and a rubric of what they need to do or a handout that guides them through the process will really help them perform better. They need support, they need that scaffolding. So the research just says that they're going to enjoy it more, they're going to learn more, and they're going to be less nervous if we give them very clear expectations about what we need them to do to perform well. So I think that's just a really good thing to know. You probably remember in your first class when you didn't know exactly what you were hoping to do, how nerve-wracking that is. But once you develop a set of things that you hope to accomplish, it makes things a lot easier. So that's finding 2. Finding 3 is that a lot of times these peer activities, peer teaching activities will take place in groups, and that's great. But if you don't hold students accountable for the material, they can do a little of that social loafing and not actually participate the way they need to get the benefits. So the authors of the book recommend coming up with a method to hold students accountable, and not just accountable for their part, but accountable for their performance as a whole. So if you are going to break down the information and have each student presenting a different part, that's great. But they have to be accountable for all of the material as well. So for instance, if you ask them a question about some of the material that was not in their section, they should still be able to answer appropriately. So I just think this keys into something that we say a lot, which is students don't do optional. And if you just say, hey, teach, you're going to have a lot of conversation and a lot of wasted time. But if you tell students, I'm going to be circulating and I'm going to be making sure that you guys are making appropriate contributions, or if you give students the opportunity to grade each other, that holding them accountable increases the likelihood that they'll make good use of their time. So that's the big deal here. So I'm going to move on to the very last one, and we'll take a minute to reflect on these 4. So as I mentioned before, groups are a good thing. Research repeatedly shows that when students are given the chance to perform by themselves and then compared to their performance in a group, the same students do better in group situations. Now, students don't always believe this, but once you show them, they can buy into it. So if you've ever experimented with group exams, students will tend to get better grades when they take exams in groups, and that makes sense. So when you use groups to teach, they'll do a better job at teaching than if you ask individuals to teach. So the idea here is harness the power of the group and make it so that students don't have to be perfect in their teaching because they've got their group mates to back them up. So I think this is a valuable takeaway from the book, which is one-on-one peer teaching is fine, but you're going to increase the quality of the teaching when you ask people to teach in groups. So here is where I'm going to ask you to reflect on these four. So we've talked about these four different best practices, and what I'd like you to do is rate yourself, and you don't have to chat this in, just do it on a piece of paper. Rate yourself from 0, meaning I don't think I do this at all in class, to 5, meaning, or actually I put to rock star. So 0 to rock star, whatever you want to do in the in-between spots. But how would you rate yourself on how often you demonstrate these best practices in class? If you haven't used reciprocal peer teaching yet, you may not be able to rate yourself on these, but I encourage you to think about whether or not you feel ready to engage in these. So again, as a review, the first one is giving students time to prepare before they have to teach, making sure you have structured tasks to scaffold the best efforts of the students so they have clear expectations communicated to them, that you hold students accountable by giving extra credit points or class participation points or assignment points, some way that you're going to grade them on the work that they do, and then using groups. So take a moment, and when you've had a chance to reflect on this, chat in and let me know that you're ready to move on. And if you have questions, this is a great time to ask them. Nancy, just so you know, you are chatting privately. So I would love, if you're willing, to change your chat to everyone. You can use the little in the send to box. If you click on that arrow, you're going to have to scroll all the way up to the top and then pick everyone. That way everyone will be able to see. So, but I see you're saying that you've used it, and the more you use it, the better you get. Yeah. It takes some practice thinking about how much of your course grade you want connected to these kinds of activities, how much time you are able to devote to giving students to prepare. The idea is you definitely want them to have some time. So, all right, let's see. So Russ is ready to go. Awesome. And Russ says he needs to give them more time for them to prepare in advance. You know what? I found that was a huge difference in the way this peer teaching worked. When I would just say, all right, I know you guys read last night, let's go and do this activity, a lot of times there was hesitation, but when I started awarding points for demonstrating that they had prepared, then they came to class really prepared and we could jump in. So. All right, so Cynthia, Pam, Michelle, all of you guys, if you're willing to chat in, let me know when you're good to go. Pam, thanks, gotcha. Cynthia says she needs more time to adequately prepare and work on the structured tasks. No lie, it's a challenging thing to make sure that we communicate our expectations to students well. And so we'll talk about that as we get to these specific activities, some of the things you can tell students to help guide them in the expectations. Oh, Russ, I'm so sorry. Yeah, give us another call. So Nancy says she generally chooses topics that she thinks are dry. That's a good technique because students can make the material more exciting rather than you having to drone on about a topic that you know that they already don't get excited about. So I like that idea. All right, so there's still a few of you I haven't heard from. Oh, Cynthia's, yeah, definitely groups really, they help. Students feel less nervous, and you can always start with groups And as the semester goes on, you can bring it down to smaller groups as they get more confident, but there's so much power in a group, I kind of like using them. All right, so I'm going to move on from this. We are going to take a moment to pick some actual activities that we're going to discuss. So the authors of this book call their activities ideas, and it stands for Intentionally Designed Educational Activities. So let's take a peek at the ones that they present for reciprocal peer teaching. So what you're going to see is the title of the ideas and an idea number from the book with page numbers in case you've got the book and want to follow along. And I'm going to summarize these for you briefly, and then I'd like you guys each to chat in with the idea number that you most want to hear about. So we'll take a peek at that. Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle, I see that you just chatted in. Interested in learning more about groups? Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about some of these techniques really make use of groups, and so hopefully you'll get some good ideas. And yes, having students assess each other, I actually learned it from a student who told me that her high school teacher had done it, and I thought, why have I not heard of this before? And so I've been doing that, and they really seem to like it. It gives them a little power. Okay, so let me run you guys through these ideas. Note-taking pairs. Essentially, this is a very small group activity, but you can do a mini lecture, which is a technique a lot of us like, and you ask students to take notes, and you basically then give a break after the lecture period and ask them to compare notes. So they're going to teach each other, like, oh, I see you're missing this, but I got that. So it's a really nice form of peer teaching when they school each other on how to take better notes. And it also gives time for them to ask questions of you, like, do I have what I need? So note-taking pairs is idea number 25. Milling is you provide a list of questions to students, and students have some preparation time to work on those questions on their own, and then you give them milling time in class, or they walk around and they bump into classmates in groups or in pairs, and they try to collect the answers that they were unable to answer on their own from their classmates. So classmates are helping each other with questions that they found particularly challenging, and that's what milling is. So if you like the milling idea, you're going to want to chat in number 27. Gallery walk is where you place questions around the room, and then in groups, students move from question to question, and they are going to add their response to those questions. So by the end of that period, every group has had a chance to respond to every question, and then you can have a report out where they share the big findings of the class. So that's the gallery walk. If you like that, pick 28. And then clustering is when students are going to be given a topic. Each student gets their own topic. They get time to prepare on it, and then they walk around the room and try to teach each other other topics and try to figure out connections between topics. So if I have topic A and you have topic B, after we discuss, we will decide whether or not we think these topics are connected in some way, and if so, we form a cluster and then we move together for the rest of that class period. So that's clustering. I like that one a lot because we experts have a real broad view of our field and we know how to connect things together, but research shows that students often just think of things as completely separate facts, and it's a lot harder to remember material when you don't make those connections. So clustering allows students to learn how to think like experts and find those connections. So I'd love for you, and I see some of you guys are chatting in, so I'm going to start tallying these votes. We've got some votes here, and then we're going to pick what we'll cover on the basis of what you guys have selected. So we've got a 34 and a 27. Oh, Cynthia, you said that is too cool. You have to tell me which one you were talking about. Oh, 34 and 27 are cool. I get it. So Russ says yes. And Pam, you're asking about the list before the lecture. I don't know which idea you're talking about, so let me know and I can answer that question. Michelle says 28. Looks like Cynthia. Are you voting for 28 or are you just saying you've used it? Because it is a great technique. Nancy's voting for 34. Lynn's going for 28. Pam was going for 27. All right. Let's see. So the question, question was, do you give the list before the lecture? Yes, you, for milling, you can choose to do that. You know, I think that it would make the activity very different if you gave the list ahead of time or after. So you could choose to do that. I don't remember which they recommend, but I'll take a peek real quick. Okay, so Nancy was 28, and 27. We've got a 28. Hi, Marissa, I did see you before. Welcome. Rest like 34. All right. Has everybody chatted in who wants to? Yeah, so Pam, in response to your question about milling, the authors don't necessarily pair it with a mini lecture. So if you wanted to go that route, I think that's a brilliant way to do it. But you could also give the questions after a lecture, before a reading, after a reading. Cynthia wants 25 and 34. Okay. All right, so it looks like the ones that are winning are 28 and 34. So I will start with those, and if we have time, we can attack a couple extras. All right, so let me bounce over to 28. There we go. All right, and like I said, I'm going to be giving you copies of all of these, so you'll get something like this on all of those different ideas. And I hope that that would be enough to give you a start once you get the email. So idea 28, the gallery walk. The way I do this one is I get really large Post-it notes. They come on kind of like a cardboard easel, and you can just write on them, and then you can post them around the room, and then you can save them for later. But another option is to just tape together a bunch of papers so that you can make a large paper on the board, or if you have a whiteboard in your room or a chalkboard, you could just write the questions on the whiteboard or the chalkboard. So these are some options. But in this one, you're going to decide how much time that you use, and then figure out how many questions you can ask in that amount of time. Then you prepare that number of questions, and you can relate it to a reading, you can relate it to a mini lecture, you could relate it to homework. I've heard all kinds of great ideas about how to use the gallery walk, but you basically put up questions and create them as headers, and then you're going to bring markers or chalk, depending on what you need. So the process is you hang posters and you form the teams. You're going to need one team, one group per poster, and you give the students a moment to look at the material. In this one, you're going to want to have them do the prep generally right there in class or ahead of time. And then they go and they spend some time talking about it, and then they're going to write their answers. And they need to identify their group. They can come up with a group name or a group one or whatever. And then after an amount of time has passed, you say shift, and everybody switches to the next poster, and they add information. And you do that as many times as it takes to get all groups to attack all questions. If you're running short on time, you don't have to let everybody go, but it's kind of fun to collect all of those responses. And then at the end, for the report out and reflection time, each group presents the poster that they're standing by. So they have the notations of which group supplied which information. If they need a little backup, they can call on the other group and say, hey, group 2, I don't know what you're talking about here. Could you clarify? And that group can share. But by the end of this technique, everybody's tried every question, and then everybody has heard everyone's responses. It also says you can give students time to walk around and see all the posters on their own at the end. You can do that in conjunction with the report out or instead of the report out. But I found my students actually will walk around, if I give them permission to use their phones, they'll take pictures of them so that they can have those to retain that information. So hopefully I've explained Gallery Walk to your satisfaction. If you have questions, let me know. What I want you to do right now is just a quick gut check. And if you will chat in your gut response to this activity, 1 meaning this is not something I would use in class, it's not useful, all the way up to 5, which would be I would like to do this in class tomorrow. then I can get a sense of how it's working for you guys. Michelle gives it a 5. And what I'm going to encourage you to do, for anything that you give a 5, maybe note that in your notes and start thinking about, what topic might I use this on in my own classes? We won't share that just yet, but after we've talked about the other activities, we're going to have some time to share our brainstorms about how we would use this. So people are liking this one. That's awesome. Yeah, I've used it several times. I actually use it in some of the workshops that we do with the FCTL, and I find it a really effective technique. So I've got chats in from Michelle and Nancy and Russ. If anybody else wants to chat in, I'd love to see what you think about it. Pam says 4. Yeah, the time element matters, and I should have mentioned that up front. Chapter 1 of this book talks about the lecture method, and that tends to be the fastest method for getting information out. But the problem is, just because you've gotten the information out doesn't mean the students have already retained that information or understood that information. So all of the rest of the chapters really focus on a bit more time-intensive kind of techniques, and you do have to think about how long you're willing to give up your class time. So Marissa says she's done something similar with the Student Money Management Office. It was a great way to get the room energized and thinking. Yeah, getting them up and walking is really helpful. If you've got students with mobility issues, you can actually help pass the posters instead of making students walk. But the getting them up if they can is really great. So Marissa gives it a 5. Yeah, Nancy says she's teaching one of those long 3-hour classes, and it really is good to give them a chance to get up and reflect and think and move. Well, cool. All right, so I'm going to hit the next activity, and you guys keep chatting in if you want to add in your gut check, because I do think it's a good chance to really think about whether you're likely to use it or not. All right, so the other one you guys wanted to talk about was clustering, and this is, heck, I couldn't pick a favorite, but if this is close. So clustering, as I mentioned, is really all about giving students the chance to start to develop an expert view of a topic where they connect between topics instead of treating this definition as completely separate from that definition, which is not a way that we're going to internalize and understand. So for this activity, what you're going to need to do is create a list of facts, concepts, topics, themes from readings or from a lecture that you've given. And so you put each separate topic on its own index card. And then you just shuffle those up before class, and then you're ready to go. That's the preparation for this one. If you're an instructor who already has developed learning objectives, looking at your learning objectives is probably a great place to get some of those topics. But you guys know what you're covering in a class, and especially if you've taught it before, or if you've had students struggle on areas in an exam in the past, you can pick those things that you know they're going to struggle on for the exam and load the topics with those. In class, you explain to everybody, hey, you've got to prepare a little bit ahead of time, but each student's going to get a card, and then they're going to get 3 minutes to really dig into that topic. They can use their notes from lecture, they can use their textbook, whatever they've got to make sure they have some good information. And I encourage them to just flip that card over and write their notes right there on the back. If you want to reuse your cards, just tell them to put it on their own note paper. Once they've had those 3 minutes to prep, they are now considered the expert on their topic, and you give them time to walk around the room, and they greet their classmates, and when they meet up, they look at each other's cards, and they say, hey, let me teach you about my topic. And the other person says, let me teach you about mine. Then they decide together whether there is any relationship between those two topics. If there's not, they say, nice meeting you, and they separate. If there is a connection, then they cluster together, and now they walk together, and the next time they meet up with a student, both of them are going to explain their topics and why they think they're a cluster to the other student, and then they'll decide whether that student needs to join the cluster. So there's peer teaching multiple times here, and there is this encouragement of students to develop these big views. After you are watching and you see that there's very few students walking around by themselves anymore, so you've got a good number of clusters, you stop the activity and have everybody report out what they think their cluster should be named. So this is kind of providing an overarching theme to the clusters that they've developed. They explain why they fit together, and then students can take some time to write down some of the clusters. Oh, I never thought that those things would go together, but they do. And so this is a really good opportunity at the very end for you to say, oh, I completely agree with those clusters. That's the way my expert brain connects these topics. Or you can say, I'd never thought about that before. That's really cool. Or I've got some suggestions for the way that you might want to cluster some of these in the future. So this is the clustering activity, and I really think it challenges students to start making connections. And once they've learned how to make connections, they might do it themselves spontaneously in other classes and for your other lessons. So I think this is a really cool thing to use. So I'd love to get your gut check. Rate it for me. Tell me what you think. And then we're going to take some time to talk about how you might want to use it. So Michelle says she loves this brainstorming now about what class topics I can apply. I know that's the fun part, especially if you've seen students struggle every year on the same questions on exams. This can be a great way to help that. So the repetition and discussion is great for retention. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Russ gives it a 5. He's used it before to teach the structure for making a speech. He divides the cards into elements that go into a speech. Oh, nice. So you walk them through the process of speech writing, but then you get them to connect each other. So which things are close to each other. That's a very cool idea. And then they're really practicing with how to give a presentation. So nice, Russ. I like that. Marissa's given it a 4. She's going to try it in a training session with the department. I think that's a great idea. It's always good to practice your techniques and build up your chops on these. Pam says she hasn't heard of it before. She gives it a 2, needs to think about it. And that's cool. You know, some topics work better for this than others. But, you know, I know that you are in library, so maybe something like you could have a bunch of sources. If you're teaching students about possible sources, you could have Wikipedia, you could have a peer-reviewed journal, you could have a textbook, and then you can ask students to share the strengths and weaknesses of each and talk about what kinds of assignments you might want to use those on and maybe have them cluster in that way. I don't know, that's just something off the top of my head, but that might be a way to use this in library. So Nancy likes it. She gives it a 5. A lot of pair and share, and this is another approach. Yep, absolutely. Think, pair, share is similar, but this one allows them to build connections even beyond just 2. So I think that's a cool thing. So does anybody else want to chat in a rating? Oh, welcome, Joyce. Hi, I hadn't seen you before. I'm glad things are working. Okay. Anybody else want to chat in their gut check? All right. Okay, so a couple of you guys have already done this. I am going to bounce over to here. And I want you to think about one that you might try in your classes. We didn't cover note-taking pairs or milling, though you got the summary, so if those appealed to you, you might be able to share why they appealed and how you might think about using them. I can provide some guidance with some of the best practices on those. But we did cover the gallery walk and clustering, so I'd love to hear what you guys think. And here's the interesting thing. You guys are from a ton of different fields. Don't be shy. Share the way you would use it in your class, with which topics you might want to attack with it, because there's something about hearing somebody talk about doing something in a completely different field that's really going to spur creativity in the rest of us. So don't be shy. Share, even if you think, oh my gosh, they're not going to know what I'm talking about here, share it. And you are free to either chat in or if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do that and share how you might use one of these. Oh, thanks, Marissa. All right, so Marissa is mentioning that she'd like to try the clustering when it comes time to discuss money management, finding ways to save, barriers to saving. Oh, cool. So maybe having them cluster on whether it's a good idea or a bad idea or something that's a benefit or a barrier. That sounds really cool. I like that. So what else do you guys have? So Joyce is saying maybe using Idea 25 at clinicals. How might you use that at clinicals, Joyce? Getting them to do exactly what? Because I'm thinking of clinicals, maybe I'm wrong on what clinicals are, but as a very hands-on kind of experience. So I'd love to know how you're going to apply it there. And clustering for classroom. I got it. That makes sense. PowerPoint slides for milling. Absolutely. I hadn't shown you guys that one yet. So let me get over to it. Oh, my cursor's gone. That makes things fun. What just happened?
You're in full screen of another application.
That's just so weird. Okay, I'm going to try again. Sorry, y'all. I got it back. Yay. Okay, so milling. I hadn't shown you guys this one, but it's a good one to take a peek at. So here the big deal is going to be you give an assignment, you organize a series of questions, and the authors encourage them to be in a level of difficulty, so from easy to difficult. They encourage us to think about how long it's going to take to answer these questions, and they say maybe double the amount of time it takes you to answer them. You can give this as a homework assignment, or you can have them do it in class. And then the students are given some time to answer all the questions that they're able to, and then you give them a chance to walk around the classroom, finding people who have answers that they don't have, getting an explanation so that they can then answer the question. And then at the end of it, there's a report out session where the class can talk about the answers, and you can check in to ensure that everybody's got all the questions answered. Because it could be that your most difficult one, nobody got, you know. So there's that. No worries, Russ. All right. So Joyce is suggesting that during post-conference activities, oh, this is for the clinicals thing. All right. So have students exchange diagnosis, compare. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so that's a really great idea. So you're going to, after they've actually tried to engage in the activities in the clinical, you're going to give them a chance to share with each other what they've done. I like that idea. All right, so oops, Michelle, I just lost you. There we go. So Michelle is talking about clustering. She thinks that she could use it for introduction to hospitality. There's a lot of segments of the industry that are interrelated. Oh, this is a great idea, right? Because students don't necessarily know that these parts of your industry that they think as very separate are actually connected and how they might connect. So I think that's a really good idea because they might be thinking, all I want to do is focus on hotels, but they don't realize that the same skills that they need for that kind of work might be beneficial for other areas. I love that idea. That sounds really cool. All right, so Russ is going with milling, and he thinks a nice way to help study for quizzes and exams. Absolutely, because you can maybe try to not necessarily give exam questions there, but questions that are similar to things that students have struggled with on the exam before. You can kind of stack the deck in their favor and help them get some practice with those complex topics. Another thing I love about milling, there's a lot of research to suggest that students don't just need practice learning material, they need practice retrieving material. So anytime you give sample quizzes or ask them to bring information out of their long-term memory and then use it, you're giving them a real benefit, and they'll actually learn the material more deeply and know how to retrieve it better. So that's a really great idea. So I like that a lot. So anybody else want to chime in? Heard from a good number of folks, but I don't know if there's anybody else who wants to share an idea. All right, I'm going to get off this milling screen so we have the, oh, sorry, Nancy. I'm glad you're back, though. All right. So I know we didn't cover note-taking pairs, but it's a pretty, basic concept, I think. And I just had real great luck with this I find that my students often, if I show a video in class, they forget that they should be taking notes. I'm always fascinated by that because, of course, they need to take notes on a video. So I showed a video in class, and then I had them listen to a related podcast in very short snippets. But I told them ahead of time, you're going to be doing an activity with these notes afterwards, so take good ones. And they actually did. And then it was really cool when I put them in pairs to hear students going, oh, I didn't catch that statistic. That's a really important statistic. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't understand that's what they meant by that study. And so they really got a better understanding of the podcast and video as they were comparing and contrasting and checking up on the quality of the notes that they'd taken with their classmates. So I thought that was a really great way to reinforce the idea that note-taking is important. So Lynn says, culturally not always possible. My students use ASL and many videos in ASL, so it's not possible to be mindful of students who are not able to take notes during videos. Oh, I hear ya. So if they're signing instead of taking notes, I'm not clear as to why. Is it because they're having to focus so much more visually? I think I'm following. Let me know if that's what you're talking about. Yeah. So because you have to keep your eyes focused. I hear you. So you know what? There's another technique that we talked about in a previous chapter where they encourage people to tell their students, listen, don't take notes. Afterwards, take some time to take notes. So you could try it that way. And I think that might be a good thing to do because I'm always going to tell my students if they don't have notes when they leave a class, they are going to struggle to retain all that information. But sometimes taking notes for anybody can be difficult while they're listening and engaging with the material. So if you give a short break after a video or a short break after a mini lecture, you can say, all right, now try to core dump all that information that you just heard onto that piece of paper and then compare. So Lynn, let me know if you think that technique might make it more possible. But I understand that that is still an issue. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's important for me to think about that. Or you have to do that by design. Great. So that actually makes, wow, that makes ASL classes a really interesting study because you guys have to encourage students to listen first and then take notes. I'd never thought about that. I often see my students scribbling down notes, and I'm like, hey, eyes up here. We're talking about this thing, and you guys are taking notes on a slide that I haven't even gotten to yet. So that's actually really cool. I'm going to have to try that. All right. So anybody else want to weigh in? And Lynn, I really appreciate you bringing that up because many of us have students who we need to think about that for. Anybody else? So chat in if you're good to go. We're going to move on, or if you want to stick on these topics for a little longer. We got one vote for good to go. All right, all right. All right, thank you guys. I think we're going to move on. So we're going to jump into chapter 4, and this chapter is on academic games. So I think these can be a lot of fun. I know this is an example of a horrible PowerPoint slide, but I just stuck it up there so you can have the details when you get the PowerPoint. The big deal is games have rules and games have structure, and those are two really good things to give to students. Games also are fun, and so that can provide motivation to students. So the big picture here is goal-directed behavior with a lot of structure that's fun, and that is plus, plus, plus for students. So research on effectiveness, the first finding from Hayes 2005 is much like what we talked about with reciprocal peer teaching, where students like it, and we never see a decrease in effectiveness between this and traditional instruction, and in some cases we'll see an improvement. The 2013 study is actually interesting to me because it's a meta-analysis, which is, looking at a bunch of studies and collapsing their data together. When you look at a bunch of studies, you get a lot more power in your findings, and they found that games were beneficial to improve cognitive competencies, so things like learning and memory, retention, all that stuff, and some interpersonal competencies. So it can help students benefit through an ability to interact socially and also with memory issues. So I think that the research is there to say that academic games have real benefit and they might be worth your time to explore. So I'm going to leave this heavily wordy slide, and I hope you got the big take-homes, but you'll have it later as well. Okay, so some best practices. Once again, we're going to talk about 4 of their findings, then I'll give you a chance to reflect on those to make sure that you've got a handle on them. So finding 1, again, this kind of harkens back to what we were talking about before. Students are novices, they need scaffolding. You don't want to just go, hey, play a game. You need to give them some guidance. So if you use games as your only form of instruction, they tend not to be all that beneficial. But if you provide some instruction through a reading assignment, a homework assignment, a mini lecture, so they've got some information, then a game can give them a chance to practice it. So you really want to use this as a way to scaffold learning rather than as a first attempt at providing information to students. So there's that. So finding 2, again, group work matters. Collaboration improves the student experience. If they are playing as individuals, the level of competitiveness or the nervousness that comes from not being able to play effectively can be problematic. But if you put them in groups where they've got teams attacking the game, they tend to report that it was more enjoyable. And, you know, it's a game. If it's not enjoyable, you probably don't need to be doing it. So you can do other things that are not enjoyable, but games should be fun. So consider group games as an option here. Finding 3, I know I'm bouncing through these at a pretty good clip, but I'll give you that summary slide, and we'll have some time to reflect. So non-competitive games. The authors say, of course, some people love competition, and you can pay homage to that by incorporating some competitive games. But what we find is that if you win, you're going to rate the game as being awesome, but if you lose, you rate the game as not being quite so awesome. So the idea here is if you use some non-competitive games, then there are no losers, and nobody is going to feel a real negative experience of that game. So if you choose to go with competitive games, and I hate the whole everyone gets a trophy, but you can point out how different groups or different individuals performed well, even if they weren't the winner. Or I also find throwing candy at students kind of takes some negative emotions away, so consider that. But non-competitive games might be a thing to consider. Feedback matters. If you just play a game and you have your winners and your losers, or everybody wins, students don't get the benefit of your expert guidance. So the idea is that students need feedback, whether it's through a point system that's inherent to the game, whether it's you're communicating to them that they've handled something well. Some games you can actually provide written feedback, but I mean, you guys probably know this from your students. Students are asking for our feedback. They want to know if they're meeting our expectations. So providing it even in games is a real benefit. So this was the finding across all the studies of gaming. So you really want to consider this pretty heavily. You want to give feedback to students. So I'm going to take a moment again here. This is where you can privately rate yourself. You do not have to chat this in because not all of us want to share when we're not experts in something. But rate yourself from 0 to rockstar on each of the 4 best practices findings. So giving students some instructional support and scaffolding, remembering that games shouldn't be the way we teach information, but the way we give students some time to reflect and practice with information already taught. That's the scaffolding. We want to think about collaboration and harness the power of the group. It works in games just as it works in peer teaching. Consider using non-competitive games so that you don't have losers who feel negatively about the experience, and then providing feedback. So take a minute, think about how you rate yourself on these if you've used games before. If not, these same findings support other kinds of activities that you may have done, so you can still rate yourself from 0 to rockstar. So I'm going to drink a bit of water. I'll let y'all reflect. Thanks, Cynthia. So Joyce's saying that she already plays and loves to play games. I do too. I'm a gaming nerd, I'll be honest. All right, so it looks like you guys are ready to go. So we're gonna take a minute and start looking at some options for ideas to improve academic games. So again, we've got 4 here. The first one is a scavenger hunt. And here you can provide questions and then students have to hunt down answers. Also, you can provide experiences that you want them to go out and get and have them go do that. So they could visit offices on campus or find things online, find examples of different kinds of speeches or find examples of different kinds of sources. So that's a scavenger hunt. Who Am I is sort of a game of 20 questions where one student or a group of students have a topic and the rest of the students have to ask yes or no questions to try to figure out what topic that student or group of students has. So, you know, if I'm holding a card that says Piaget's theory of development, I'm using a psych example, students can ask questions like, are you a research method? And I'd be like, oh, no, I'm not a research method. Are you a theorist? And I go, kind of, yes, go yes. You know, are you about development or are you, and that kind of thing. So students are going to query each other and try to hone in on the topic that the student has. So Houston, we have a problem. This is sort of a hands-on one. Students are given a problem and then some materials to solve it. And then in groups, they're going to attack the problem and come up with a solution. So this could be anything from a question, and then you provide them some evidence that they can use to solve the problem. If you want to do something in kind of a lab setting, you could have a topic and give them resources that will allow them to do something like make a diagnosis or anything like that. But Houston, we have a problem. You provide possible solutions, but they're going to have to organize them into something that makes sense, and they're going to each attack a problem. Top 10, it's sort of like the old David Letterman top 10 list. And so you have students come up with the 10 most important whatever, 10 most important things they picked from your last lecture, 10 most important things they gleaned from the reading, 10 most important things they discovered about themselves through an exploratory exercise that you had them do. And then you can, either just everybody clap for all of the different lists, or you can pick a winner or pick some favorites. And in this one, you could pick favorites from each group, and then everybody wins. So hopefully I've given you a sense of what these 4 ideas have to offer. And again, I'm going to ask you to chat in with the number. So if you like scavenger hunt, you want to chat in 37. If you like Who Am I, chat in 38. And chat in the number, and we will use those votes to guide which ones we cover. And if it didn't explain one of them enough, let me know, and I can clarify. Thanks, Pam. I gotcha. 42 and 47. Okay, so let me go back. Somebody. Russ is 37 and 42. And Lynn is 42. Marissa is 37. Tim is 37. Marissa, I feel the same way. Nancy, 38. Michelle is 37 and 42. Cynthia is 42 and 37. All right. Joyce says she loves them all. We'll try 47 and 42. Okay. All right, is that everybody? You good? Looks like, oh, sorry, I didn't catch you. Oh, Heather, perfect. Thank you. 47. All right, so it's looking to me like we have two clear winners, which are 37, the scavenger hunt, and 42, Houston, we have a problem. I picked that at first because it was a Texas city, so it's like you have to do that. And then in third place will be top 10. So we'll make a judgment based on time. We're going to go through at least 37 and 42, and then we'll hit the top 10 if we have time. So, scavenger hunt. All right. So this one is a really kind of fun, hands-on activity, and I feel like it is really easily bent to any number of topics. What you're going to do is you create a list of tasks or questions about course content. If you've done a scavenger hunt early in the semester and you're going to do another one, you can actually encourage students to develop their own scavenger hunt list, or each student can provide one thing they think would be fun to find. So it's very flexible in the way you generate the tasks. You're going to want to develop a point structure if you are going to make it competitive, and a set of rules. So how long do students have to do this? What kinds of things can they use? But your tasks can be all over the place. So you could encourage them to go online and find real-world examples of things that you've presented in class. You could have them go to a computer lab on ACC campus and figure out how to print things, or, you know, there's any number of things that you can do here. So either tasks or questions. And then for the process, you'll just have created your scavenger hunt and you distribute that. The authors encourage doing this in groups, as of course they would, but you could choose to do that or not. Then you go over the rules, clarify if there are questions, and then let students hunt. At the end, it's a good idea to do a debriefing where everybody reports out, you know, what was your favorite thing that you found, or what was the hardest thing to find, or was there anything that you just couldn't get? And then you can essentially score if you're choosing to do that, give prizes, or award something to groups for their special contribution. So the scavenger hunt is super flexible. It can give students some real-world practice, and I think it is well worth your time if you're interested in giving it a try. So if I've explained it well enough, please gut check in and chat in your rating of this from 1 to I hate scavenger hunts, all the way up to 5, I'm on a hunt right now, and you just don't know. So let me hear what you think. So Cynthia gives it a 3. Joyce is liking that one. Russ 2. I always love this part, you guys, because I think it has a lot to do with the topics that we teach, about whether we can think about whether these would work or not work. And there are obviously some real clear connections between topics and techniques. Nancy is thinking about how she could make it work because she wants to include more games. That's cool. You know, Nancy, because I know your field, I've thought about, you know, different, you know, psychological theories. You can try to have them hunt for studies or research that is used on that. So that might be something. Okay, so Marissa's given it a 4, Pam's got a 3. So Cynthia is thinking about it and reading. Pam hates competitive games. And see right there, Pam, that's exactly why the authors are suggesting maybe stay away from them, because some people really get engaged. As soon as you say it's a competition, they're like, yes, I will take you down. And other people, that immediately makes them build up a wall against what we're doing. So it's important to think about that. Scavenger hunt does not have to be competitive. You don't have to award points or anything, but you can if you want. So Kim says, 2, not sure how to incorporate it in biology classes. Could be useful at the beginning of the semester to help students get comfortable with some of the resources. Absolutely. They actually use something like this in some of the student development classes where they get them to visit the different learning labs and all of those kinds of things. I don't know if your biology classes have a lab, but something that you could do is have them go through the lab and identify equipment this way. So they have to have at least connected to all of the stuff, or, you know, if you're, you know, I know in my microbiology class, it took us a long time to figure out how to focus those microscopes. So you could put a little thing under the microscope and you tell them they have to get it in focus and get you to check off that task. But there's all sorts of things that you can try. So hopefully you'll be able to come up with some. Yeah, so Pam is saying student life does it at the beginning of the semester. Yep, absolutely, to get them to connect with a bunch of different things that they can do and the resources that student life provides. Cool. All right, so I'm going to bounce over to Houston. We have a problem. Missy, your audio is cutting out. Balan, can you help them on that? Let me know if anybody else is struggling with audio. And Russ, Balan's going to try to get that worked out for you. Joyce says she uses it as an introductory tool during orientation to get to know each other. Also at the hospital to know where to find equipment. That's a great idea, right? Because I'm sure you've got different things stored in different places, and if you make everybody go and find or take a picture of the equipment, then they're providing evidence that they've practiced with it. And once you've walked through something like that, you're so much more likely to remember it than if you just are told, don't forget, that closet has this, and that storage room has that. It's a lot easier to go through it. Great ideas, you guys. All right, so we're going to do Houston, we have a problem. So this is a group activity, and that cooperative learning is really beneficial. So you're going to have to prepare by coming up with a problem to solve. The authors encourage us to select problems that have multiple different paths, because at the end of this, it's better if each group has attacked the problem and solved it in a different way. Then students really get that critical thinking idea of there's not always a right answer. There are different ways to get to a good place. So you come up with that problem, and then you're going to select items or information that can be used to solve the problem. So if it's an informational question, you can put a lot of different facts. If it is a lab activity, you can provide lab equipment. If it's a math problem, you can give a bunch of different formulas, some that are helpful, some that will lead them astray. So that's where these red herrings come in. You can provide facts that have nothing to do with the question, or you can provide lab equipment that's got nothing to do with solving the problem, because students need to take ownership of information, and they need to be comfortable saying, this is not useful, or to argue for something that is or isn't useful. So that's where the red herrings come in. So you place students in groups, you give them the problem, and something that I've done as a tweak on this, it is great to have all students working on the same problem, but you can also kind of pair it up with a gallery walk sort of approach where each group gets a different problem. And then at the end, students are exposed to solving several different problems. So you make the decision about what works best for your topic. You're the expert on that. As students are working on solving the problem, you want to circulate around so that you can help them out. If they're struggling, you can provide some options, but you don't want to solve things for them. You really want to hold back the solution and say, I'm not giving you that. And then at the end, each group is going to report out their solution. Ross, you're still struggling with that? Would you recommend them hanging up and trying again?
Yeah, that's what I recommended.
Okay, y'all are talking offline. I hear you. So hopefully we'll get this worked out, Russ. I'm sorry. Okay, so just as an example of this, you can use this for course content. You can use this as a team building. Early on in the semester, just giving students a chance to work together can be really fun. I was in a professional development workshop where they gave us all straws and told us to build the tallest tower that we could build, and we had just like 3 minutes to do it. So it was super fast, but that teamwork just kind of got us talking and connected in a really nice way. So let me have you guys check in. 1 is that you don't think this would be likely to be useful to you. 5, it would be extremely useful to you. So Russ is giving it a 5. Joyce is giving it a 5. Great. Okay, so pretty high ratings. That's awesome. I know that's where my mind goes. As soon as I hear a technique like this, I'm like, how do I use it? All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So let me get you guys to think about one of these two that you've given a high rating to, and that your gears are already turning. So think about how you might try to implement it. And if, while we're doing this, anybody wants me to bounce on over to one of the additional ones, let me know, and I can do that. But take a minute to think about whether you want to try the scavenger hunt or Houston, and how you might use it with your own material. And then chat it in or talk to us, whichever is easier. Oh, thanks, Pam. Let's see. All right, so Pam says you can pose different problems with research sources, negotiating the library website to find a scholarly article material from an online reference book, formatting a citation. So you're talking about using the Houston We Have a Problem for that, or scavenger hunt? Let me know which one you're focusing on. But that sounds like a great idea. I could see you using it with either of them, actually. So Russ is thinking about the scavenger hunt. He's going to use it during the first week for students to learn the course syllabus policies. Oh, I love that idea. And finding information on the course Blackboard page. What a brilliant idea. Because there is nothing less likely to happen than students reading a syllabus with no reason to read the syllabus. I mean, aside the obvious, that it tells them everything they need to know to be successful, but sometimes they don't know that. So if you could have them do a scavenger hunt, like how many points do you get from exams, and how many, what percentage of your grade is determined by speeches? Are there opportunities for extra credit? I love that. That's a brilliant idea. Yeah, Pam is saying both would work for that introduction to the library and resources, either the scavenger hunt or the Houston. So Michelle's liking Pam's scavenger hunt. I do too. And for those of us who teach, some research in our classes, if you connect with the librarians, they can often, put something together for you like this. If you say, hey, I'd love some help, here's this this scavenger hunt idea. Could you help me with a scavenger hunt when you do your presentation in my class? I think that could be cool. Pam might help. I'm not volunteering you for anything, I swear, Pam. All right. So Pam is saying scavenger hunt. Oopsie, I lost that one. I'm going back to it. Scavenger hunt, maybe one more answer task. Find the database list, find the group study room procedure. Yeah, that's really cool, because then they can learn how to make those reservations. They learn how to use the database. Pam's saying yes. I think she's okay with being signed up for such a thing. All right. Cynthia says she's thinking about both in the integrated reading and writing class, because my students have a research paper and the writing process, but also breaking up a topic of reading an article about social justice. Oh, cool. So you could have them attack the steps of reading an article through, and you're thinking about both. Maybe I need a little clarification, because I want to hear how you're going to do that. It sounds cool. So Nancy is jumping in with the top 10, identifying best strategies for working in the field. Oh, cool. So with child development issues, if you are teaching them some best practices, then maybe they have to rank order them in a countdown to the number 1. That would be really cool, because then you could have them compare their top 10 lists and see if there's some consistency or not. Like, does everybody think this is the most important one? I really like that idea. That's super cool. And Russ is saying top 10 best practices for preparing to give a speech. Oh yeah, that'd be good, because then you really have reinforced what they need to do to be successful before they have to do it. I think that's really cool. You could also have them rate themselves. What were the top 10 things you did in that speech, right? You know, you just gave a speech, rate yourself, give us your top 10. Joyce is saying with Houston, she's going to provide questions or case studies at 3 different times and have them work in groups to share the class. I like that idea. So if you give them a case study they could diagnose, is that what you're talking about? And you could give them several different diagnoses maybe to guide them in a couple that are wrong, or, you know, I think that'd be cool. Nancy says she loves the top 10 for self-assessment. I do too. I think that could be really cool. Joyce, awesome. Cynthia, if you want to bounce back in with some clarification on that integrated reading and writing class, I'd love to hear what you're thinking about. I know it can take a while to type. So Marissa says she agrees with Nancy for top 10 in self-assessment. Yeah, I mean, and you can, you know, if 10's a lot, you can do top 5, right? Depending on how much time you have. But I think really giving ourselves a little reward for things that we did well, I think is a really cool thing. I actually ask students to do something like that when I give back exams. I will ask them to rate their performance on a couple of questions. They have to find one they did really well on and one that they really bombed on, and they have to talk about the techniques that they used for studying those differently. And they could say, oh, I rate these as very good techniques for studying. I'm going to rate these as worse. You know, so you could rank order your study techniques too. I scrolled back, Cynthia. I think I'm following now more on the reading the article of social justice and possible solutions. So you could provide them with that Houston, we have a problem, a social justice problem, and then giving them some resources to solve it. That I think I'm following you now. All right, so I like that idea. That sounds really cool. So yeah, anytime you have a challenge, you know, I was teaching gender, we were doing gender in my human sexuality class. We talked about the benefits that come to people from being psychologically androgynous, having some typically masculine characteristics and some typically feminine characteristics. And so I challenged them to develop a way to teach people to become more androgynous. What kinds of things could we do to increase our likelihood of demonstrating androgyny in a society that's trying so hard to push us into one gender or another? Cynthia, here you are. So scavenger hunt with the research paper and the writing process to help with scaffolding. Great. So you go, where are you going to find a source? How are you going to write a thesis statement or something like that? I like that. The students have a lot of anxiety. Oh yeah, I think that's a commonality with many students. So the social justice article using Houston, I have a problem. Yeah, I love that, because really there are probably many different ways to attack a social justice problem. So if you give them that opportunity, you're going to get to hear a lot of different connections. Yeah, everything that's going on. That's really cool. Cynthia, preventing plagiarism. So yeah, so demonstrate how to write a good citation that won't get you flagged for plagiarism. I like that idea. Super cool. All right. And then Kim is saying top 10 could also be used just before a test to help guide their study efforts. Yeah. What are your top 10s? I can see a couple ways. You'll have to tell me what you were thinking about, but you could say, what are your top 10 study techniques that you're going to use? Or what are the top 10 topics that you're going to focus on? And both of those are great, but I'm always trying to get students to engage in that metacognition of, do you know how to predict what's going to be on an exam? So I think that'd be super cool. Oh, Pam's giving us a plug. Awesome. Yes, if you guys haven't seen this new tutorial, it is awesome. If my students get flagged for plagiarism once, they have to do the tutorial. That's the way I'm like, yep, you said you knew what plagiarism was. Obviously that wasn't the case. Now you're going to learn. It is a really lovely tutorial, so you guys might want to copy that link off of your chat screen. Super cool. All right. Well, you guys, this has been awesome. I am constantly amazed and impressed by my colleagues, and I love to hear how quickly you guys are able to generate some really awesome ideas with these techniques. So I want to remind all of you guys that by participating today, you've been entered into a raffle to win a copy of the awesome book. We actually had all 3 authors sign it, and so the books are signed. And you'll also get an hour and a half of professional development credit. Please take a moment. I hope you win too, Cynthia. Take a moment to chat in your name and email address so I can make sure you get the professional development credit and that you are entered in for the raffle. I hope so too, Pam. But you've got easy access to these books because they're in the library too. All right, so do make sure I've got your info and that you chatted it in to everyone so we can get you credit and we can get you access to that raffle. And then I just want to thank you all. Like, these sessions would be no fun if you didn't join in and help. And you guys made this such a blast for me. I really enjoyed hearing what you thought. So if you liked it, maybe consider giving us a shameless plug and sharing the link with your colleagues so they can join in with the next one. It really is fun to have a lot of people join in. And there are other opportunities for collaborative faculty development at the SBTL website. All of our events, we spend time digging in and reflecting and learning from each other, because I just know there are exciting things going on at this college. But if you don't tell me, if I don't learn from my colleagues what they're doing in their classrooms, I'll never get the benefit of those. So, you know, don't reinvent the wheel. Listen to your colleagues. Find out what they're doing that's powerful for them. So I will be sending you probably tomorrow an email with the PDF, and I see you guys all chatting in, so I'll answer those questions in a sec. But so probably tomorrow you'll get an email with the PDF version of this presentation, and then shortly after that you're going to get an anonymous evaluation about this, because I'm always trying to make it better. So I'd love for you guys to respond to that eval. So I'm bouncing through to look. Oh, you guys, you're so sweet. Thank you. I'm so glad that this worked for you. So let's see. So you're going to go check it out. Perfect timing. Awesome. Oh, you guys, I appreciate these sweet comments. Thank you so much. I think it's fun too. Is the chat captured? Yes, we are videoing this right now along with the chat, and then we're going to try to edit it up, and then we'll put it online. I don't know, I can ask you guys, is there a way to just give the chat back to them? Or is that not something that's possible? There's a way to just give the chat? So I might be able to figure out a way to get that chat to you guys too, but certainly when we put up the video, that'll be available. Nancy, you encouraged me too. I appreciate you a lot. Oh, there's our tech list. Okay, not private chats. Yeah, that's why we try to get everyone to do everyone, because otherwise we can't see them. Sorry, you guys. So thank you a ton for being here today. Please be on the lookout for future chats. Next month, we're going to be doing chapters 5 and 6, which I can tell you right now are going to be reading strategies and writing to learn. They've got some really great ideas, and we had fun with them last semester. So I hope you'll join us. Even if you joined us last semester, I'm always trying to add new activities, so there'll be new ones even if you've seen some of the older ones. So yes, Cynthia, that might be right up your alley. All right, well, you guys, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes in case there's any last questions, but you have been here for the whole time. I appreciate your attendance, and you are free to go. So thank you a bunch, and I hope I will see you in a future chat.